to remember all those who died because of conflict in this city. We are all scarred by every loss. Can we pray for those who've never given up, who hoped and cried and suffered, that the truth might be out, that the truth might be processed, that we might build on the rubble of the past rather than just use it to throw stones at one another.
2022年1月30日、北アイルランドデリーのクレガン地区です。川沿いから丘を登ったところにあります。ちょうど50年前に起き、北アイルランド紛争の転換点とも言われる血の日曜日事件の追悼ウォークが始まろうとしていました。地域の子どもたちを先頭に犠牲者の写真パネルを持った遺族や関係者が続きます。シュプレヒコールはありません。楽器を鳴らすこともありません。淡々と進んでいきます。1972年の1月30日も同じ道を人々が行進しました。支配層をプロテスタント系が占める中、二級市民の扱いだったカトリック系住民はアメリカの黒人たちの運動に刺激され、北アイルランドでもシビルライツムーブメント、公民権運動を始めていました。カトリック系住民は警察や軍による令状なしの拘束への反発も強めていました。こうした拘束はカトリック系で統一アイルランドを目指すリパブリカンの武装組織 IRA アイルランド共和軍やイギリスの一部であり続けることを主張するロイヤリストの武装組織への対応だとして導入されましたが、主に標的となったのはカトリック系でした。50年前の行進はそんな背景の下で計画されました。当時の北アイルランド当局は許可を出しませんでしたが、予定通り決行されました。この季節には珍しく晴れた日だったそうです。そして日が暮れるまでに13人が撃たれて死亡しました。
50年前もこの道を人々が埋め尽くしました。そして今日も遺族たちが同じ道を歩いています。
同じ場所から当時撮影した映像です。先頭を行くジョン・ケリーさん。血の日曜日事件で弟のマイケル・ケリーさんを殺されました。事件後間もなく設置された調査委員会では、発砲したイギリス軍を擁護する結論が出ました。ジョンさんは他の遺族らと共に長年調査のやり直しを求めて運動。1998年、北アイルランド和平の機運の中で新たな調査委員会が始まりました。そして2010年、犠牲者の誰一人として兵士らに身の危険をもたらす存在ではなかったとの結論が出て、イギリス政府は謝罪しました。 弟たちの名誉を回復する戦いを率いたジョンさん。一緒に現場を歩き、あの日のことを語ってもらいました。
We're in the Cragan now. This is a large housing estate.
Right.
I think there's about 10,000 people live up here.
Oh, I see.
There were lots of battles up here between the IRA and the British Army. The Army used to be based in there.
Here.
Right.
And the guys used to fire from there at them.
Right.
Yeah. We're coming up to the church where they were all buried from. That's St Mary's. So that's where everyone was buried from, that church.
Okay.
And the cemetery is just down there.
I see.
So you're right in the middle of the Cragan. As the British used to say, a hardcore Republican state.
I see.
And is this where you live?
I lived up, yeah, just down there.
Oh, okay.
You know the story of Lyra McKee, the young journalist? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
And she was covering a riot that was happening here.
Yes, yes.
And a guy, an IRA, fired a shot from there up to that lamppost and shot her dead. That was only 2 years ago.
Yes.
Less than 2 years ago.
Just 2 years ago.
Yeah. Lyra McKee, he called her.
Yes. So that was quite shocking, really.
Mm. It certainly was. Now, well, that's where we'll be tomorrow morning. We'll be gathering here and then setting off on the march itself, the walk. We're calling it the walk, it's not a march.
Okay.
So what we're doing is a walk of remembrance. The majority of the families will be doing a walk of remembrance tomorrow morning.
I see. So 50 years ago?
Yeah.
So this was the assembly
Yeah.
place?
Yeah. Within the field. So we gathered in the field. And then from there we walked from there.
I see.
Yeah, I was 23 years old at the time. I was married. I was married when I was 20. You get married early in those days.
Okay.
And I had one child, and totally non-political. But I did join a lot of the civil rights marches. We were classed as second-class citizens. Most people hadn't got a vote. Most people had no jobs. There was always difficulty about getting work. Always difficulty about getting work. And when you went into for an interview, the first question they would ask you, what school did you go to? Or even your name give away the fact that you were a Catholic. And that was held against you in most occasions. So it was about equality. Well, everybody was looking forward to the march, wondered how big it was going to be, and many people were going to turn out for it. And people were excited. Young girls, young boys, elderly people, mothers pushing babies in prams and so on.
You didn't anticipate any confrontation with the British military?
No. There may have been the possibility, as I said, of a small riot happening because riots were sort of normal in those days. Even at the weekends, it was known as a Saturday matinee, when the young guys were going down to the Bogside, Russell Street, threw a few rocks, had a bit of a laugh, a bit of crack, as they call it here.
I see.
And enjoyed their wee bit of riding. And no one would have went to the march that day if we had knew about the outcome. As far as we were concerned, we were going to go on a civil rights march, we were going to go on an anti-internment march, we were going to go on a peaceful march. And that's the way we thought the whole way down. Laughing, joking, singing. You hear the old song, it actually emerged from the American civil rights movement, We Shall Overcome.
Right.
And that song was sung right through the march, that we shall overcome.
What was your perception of IRA at that time back then?
Well, at that time, the IRA was just emerging. No, they were a force up there in the background, and you didn't see them. You seen very little of the IRA because they hadn't many members at that time. Probably somebody changed that.
Right. So what's the job situation like right now in this area?
Absolutely nothing here now. They closed down all the shirt factories. Very little engineering, but there's a lot of call centres here. You know, a lot of young people are now employed in call centres, so there's very little employment. You'll find that most of the young people would have to leave the city to gain employment, which is sad, you know, really sad. But it's not about Catholic Protestant, if you understand. You know, it's not about discriminating against people because they're Catholic or Protestants. It's just that there's no work coming to the city. Everything seems to stop at Belfast. All the big manufacturers seem to stay there and not come to our city. Again, this is all community built. Have you heard of Martin McGuinness?
Yes, of course.
That's where he lived there.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
This?
They just lived there.
Okay.
Yeah. And you've heard of John Hume?
Yes.
He lived up to here, just up here. Now this is where the army were, the soldiers.
Here.
Roadblocks. Every street that led into the bauxite was blocked off. And it was the first time I'd seen the red berets of the Paris.
I see.
And the people, you know, people were seeing the soldiers behind the roadblocks, and they were acting to them and you know, all this sort of stuff, shouting at them and all that's there. But that was all. You know, a wee bit of banter.
Yeah.
A little bit of banter. But we didn't know, even though we seen the Paris up here, they were actually installed behind that wall. When the march got to here, we were walking on down to get to the Guildhall. But when we got down to that corner, it was blocked.
I see.
By the British Army and by the police.
Okay.
Now, whilst we were there, we had the first two casualties. Damien Donaghy and John Johnson were shot. Damien was 15 years old, Johnny Johnson was 57. And they seen Damien cross the street just there, and they fired from there and shot him in the thigh. Then Johnny Johnson, who was close to Damien, ran over to help him. And the same Paras, there were two Paras involved in this, fired 5 shots altogether at those two people, injuring the both of them. The two of them survived today, but Johnny Johnson died 5 months later from his injuries. I was here along with thousands of other people, never heard the shots.
You didn't?
Because of the noise of the crowd and because of the noise of the riot, the small riot was ongoing. And that was our first two casualties on the day, and that was at 10 minutes to 4.
Right, I see.
And a guy from the official IRA, he knew there was a weapon, an old rifle over there somewhere,
I see.
and he decided to get that rifle and fire a shot back at them. Okay? And he fired a shot towards the Presbyterian Church, because that's where they were. But the weapon was defective, and he aimed in that direction and missed, and he had a drain pipe. So that famously became known as the drain pipe shot.
Okay.
Now that was the only shooting back.
I see.
The British Army said that our side fired first.
Yeah.
And that was a justification because this guy fired in retaliation. But it was proved through the inquiry the army fired first and shot these two people. And the people gathered here, the barricade was over there.
Right.
And some people went over to protest at the barricade. But others went down the street and protested down there, and eventually a small riot began.
Right.
Okay? But it was no big deal, but the majority of the march turned into Russell Street. They took it to Free Dairy Corner, which you can see just down the street there.
Yeah. There.
Just down the street. So I came walking up Chamber Street, and as I did so, I met a guy who I knew. And it was a guy called Barney McGuigan. And I worked with Barney. I stood and talked to him for a couple of minutes, then walked on. 15 minutes later, Barney was dead. He was shot in the back of the head, and the bullet came out through his eye, just up the street there. And I walked in then, into the courtyard of the Roswell Flats, when the shooting began then. And that was at 10 minutes past 4. And by 25 minutes past 4, it was all over. 13 people lay dead, one of them being my brother, and 18 badly injured. But I can tell you a story. The soldier who shot my brother is known as Soldier F, and he fired the shot from there.
Where? Can you point?
Just here.
Here.
Just there.
This one?
Yes, this wall here.
Oh, this one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the soldiers came up, Williams came over to James's Street
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
vehicles and disembarked.
Mm.
And some of them ran to here,
I see.
just there.
I see.
And one of them was Soldier F.
Mm.
So, and by the way, I have to call them by their letters because they've been granted anonymity since 1972, you know. So F fired a shot from here towards the barricade, just about 100 meters up the street, and killed my brother. Killed my brother. How we know? The bullet that killed Michael entered his stomach and embedded in his spine. Because afterwards, when they done the autopsy, they found the bullet embedded and twisted back to Soldier F's rifle. That's how we know F murdered Michael. But there is a story here, also about here. My mother, on the day, followed Michael to keep an eye on him. And she lost sight of him. That upper flat there, her sister lived in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she went into the flat and she was looking out the window for Michael to see if she can see him and called to him. And one time she did see him and she called out to him, but he never heard. And he ran on towards the barricade where he was shot dead. But while she was on that flat, these soldiers, these killers arrived there. So my mother was there when Michael was shot dead by Soldier F. She wouldn't have knew, she wouldn't have known. She was upstairs in that flat looking out the window for her son, and Soldier F, at the time she was there, fired that shot that killed her son. Incredible.
So the barricade was there.
Barricade was just there. It was just rubble.
Oh.
You know, rubble and whatever they could use at the time. They make it more difficult for the army and the police to get into the area.
I see.
And that's what that normally was, because remember, it was a no-go area at the time. It was free dairy.
Yeah.
It was free dairy at the time, so there was a lot of barricades surrounding the area. The army never ventured into the backside. They travelled to the end of the street, but never came up the street.
Ah, okay.
But that day was different. They travelled into the backside and immediately opened fire towards the barricade. The barricade was here,
Barricade was here.
approximately here, yeah. And the Roswell flats were there. So Michael was standing just about here, looking down the street, and you can see the wall now.
Oh, yes.
Short distance it is. So immediately arrived at that wall, they opened fire towards the barricade.
I see.
And Michael was the first to be shot at the barricade. And then you had John Young, Willie Nash, and Michael McDade. Those three died together, just here.
Here.
Just here, beside one another. You had Kevin McAhoney, who was at the barricade, but was crawling to safety, trying to get into the Roswell Flats to safety. Again, he was shot through the buttock. The bullet came out through his chest. And there's also Hugh Gilmore was running away up the street when he was shot in the back, and the bullet came out, went through his arm and out through his chest. So 6 died here. 6 people died here within that few minutes of each other. Few minutes. By the way, I was just over there
Right.
taking cover when this was ongoing at the time, not knowing that Michael had been shot. So we lifted him and carried him in here. So they brought Michael to here, where they give him some help, try to give him some medical aid, but they realized they had to move him because the parlors came in through that corner.
All right.
I'm talking about F, E, F, G, and H, those 4 killers. But those 4 came in that corner and immediately opened fire at the people who were carrying Michael. So Michael was lifted and then carried in that direction, and whereby they opened fire on the people who were carrying Michael. Willie McKinney and Joe Mahan were shot there. Willie McKinney was shot dead. And by the way, it was one bullet. Went through Willie and then into Joe Mahan. Joe Mahan's still alive today, but Willie died. Then you had Jim Ray at the corner. You had Patsy O'Donnell was shot here. He survived. You have Joe Friel, Michael Quinn, and Danny Gillespie, all shot in this area here. And Jerry McKinney, a father of 7 children, with one on the way, came out to surrender to Soldier G. Put up his 2 arms to show that he was unarmed, and G fired a shot at him from less than 10 meters. And a bullet entered his side, travelled through his body, and continued on, and went into a young guy beside him called Jared Dunny and killed him. One bullet. One bullet. But F himself, after shooting Willie McKinney there, he then went to where that lamppost is.
Yes.
And he looked across the street, and he seen Paddy Doherty crawling on his hands and knees, trying to get to safety, and he shot him through the buttock and out to the chest. Barney McGuigan, as he was taking cover, he seen Paddy being shot, and he listened to him calling for help. So he decided to step out to go and help Paddy. And Barney stepped out waving a white handkerchief. Soldier F again, shot him behind the left ear, bullet came out through his eye. And it just happened within this small area.
Very small.
And it took less than 15 minutes to do all the killings.
So how did you learn that Michael was shot?
Okay, when I was over there, I was lying listening to the shooting, and I decided to get up and get out of the area because I felt in danger, naturally. I looked across the street and I seen a group of people get around something, and eventually we got over to the group of people, and what they were surrounding was a guy called Jerry McKinney. And Jerry had been shot with 2 hands in the air, and people were giving first aid to him. And I was standing watching this, and I heard a call from behind me. It was my brother-in-law, and he seen me, and he called me and told me Michael had been shot. And they were just bringing him out of the house, and I helped to carry him. The ambulance pulled up here, and we put him in the ambulance, along with Jerry McKinney and Joe Mahan, who'd been shot. And we drove out of here and went to the hospital. That's how I found out Michael had been shot.
That's quite shocking for you.
Was definitely. Definitely was a terrible, terrible, terrible day. Terrible, horrific day. And I would love for me for the rest of my life. And that's why I'm so involved in proving the innocence of our people and seeking truth and justice for them. This is what my life has been all about for the last 50 years. And Michael was my youngest brother. Michael was 17 at the time, and I do remember when we went into the hospital with Michael, the doctor asked me what age he was, and I said he was 16. I forgot he just turned 17. So he was the youngest to die on Bloody Sunday. The youngest to die, 17-year-old. Actually, 6 of those who died on Bloody Sunday were 17 years old. But I remember Michael as my younger brother, as you know, lovely guy. My mother was very protective of him, simply due to the fact when I was a 3-year-old boy, he picked up a virus that went to his brain and nearly killed him. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, but he survived. Even at the time, the doctors told my mother he wouldn't survive, and even the local priest said to my mother, give him up to God. My mother refused. And eventually he came out of a coma, and he survived. On the day of Bloody Sunday, he actually asked my mother for permission to go on the march. Respect. And my mother was, I said, a wee bit anxious about him, you know, and at the start she refused to allow him to go. But eventually, through persuasion from the likes of my other sisters and maybe myself, she allowed him to go. And he was so excited about getting to the march. It was his first march, never been a march before.
So was he like politically active, would you say?
No, absolutely not. He was not interested in politics whatsoever. He was totally non-political. The reason he went on the march that day because his friends were going. And he went because he wanted to experience the march, and also he wanted to go for the crack. He was an apprentice sewing machine mechanic, just starting out in his life, just starting a new job, a recent job. And he had a whole life to look forward to, whole life. He was going steady with a young girl at the time, and he loved sweeties, loved sweets. I have a Mars bar. It's 50 years old. My mother would have bought him a couple of bars of chocolate on a Sunday night, for him going away. But he never got a chance to eat the Mars bar. So I have the Mars bar. It's actually in Belfast now at the minute, in the Ulster Museum in Belfast. It must be the oldest Mars bar in the world.
The Bloody Sunday, what was the impact on the community here, on the city?
Devastation, really, really, because what happened that day was one of the worst days of the city's life. And it changed this city forever. The town itself apparently went into a silence. Afterwards, people talked in whispers. They were totally shocked and horrified. People would tell you that Bloody Sunday was the catalyst for the troubles, the conflict. If you look at the figures, in 1972 alone, nearly 500 people died here. And that was a fallout from Bloody Sunday. So it had a major impact, not just on Derry, but the whole of the north. And I would say that the paratroopers who carried out the killings that day have a lot to be held responsible for, not just for Bloody Sunday, but for the loss of many other lives afterwards, on all sides. And there'll be hundreds of people still alive today, only for what they did here that day.
This is where I run the day of Bloody Sunday. Yeah. So that at this time to your left here there would have been high-rise flats.
I see.
And there was a car park, so you run through the car park.
Right.
And run down there. And at that time,
レイモンド・マッカートニーさんも事件当日デモに参加していました。事件をきっかけに IRA に入り、殺人罪で有罪判決を受けるも再審無罪となり、その後はシン・フェイン党の政治家として北アイルランド議会の議員も務めました。筋金入りのリパブリカンです。
But my immediate reaction was to get under cover. And I remember running through the car park in the Roswell Flats. I took cover just not far from here, just that, would have been a block of flats there, and lay in a stairwell. And you could hear the shooting happening around you. But you weren't 100% certain what was happening. But the sound of gunfire was very, very loud. Because the street had emptied. It was really, really loud. It was within 20 minutes. 13 people unarmed at a demonstration that you were at, and they were all dead. They were all dead. Whatever sort of idealism you had about peaceful demonstrations and the civil rights movement, which was a fantastic movement, you could stand up and resist peacefully against the might of a government. But when the British Army went up Roswell Street that day, that ended. To me, that was the end of it. They weren't getting your rights by peaceful demonstration. For me, it was the only way to get it was stand up and fight back.
Then you joined IRA, volunteered for it. Why?
Once you join the IRA, there's a number of options, but the options are very clearly: you can go to prison, a life on the run, or you could be shot dead. So these are the things that you had to weigh up. So I, took a few months, maybe 3 or 4 months, and then I said to myself, no. Our things were happening. I'd watched our things happening, and I said, I believe this is what I want to do. I want to be part of, to me, the only organisation that was going to bring about. First of all, the only ones who were going to confront the British, and secondly, the only ones who were going to bring about the change which I felt was necessary, and that was the end of British rule in Ireland. So I joined the IRA. Hundreds and hundreds of young men and women joined the IRA in the aftermath. You only have to look at the numbers of people over the coming year, 2 years, who ended up in prison, who, when they got out of prison and spoke about it, would have always said Bloody Sunday was the big departure.
So, if I may ask, what was your function in the IRA?
Well, like anybody, you're a volunteer, so therefore, what you do in any army, you're ready, willing to carry out the orders as given to you by the people who were in charge of you.
See. It's a bit blunt question, but did you injure anybody or kill anybody?
No, and things like that you don't talk about, but the answer is no to that.
So 3,500 people died during the trouble?
Yeah.
And And I understand that the statistics show that around 2,000 of them were caused by the Republicans like you.
Yeah.
Is that justifiable?
Well, you see, conflict happened. I mean, so therefore, as a Republican, I believe that armed struggle was necessary. Now, trying to justify the deaths of someone, because each death is personal to the person involved. But sometimes what you say to people, there was no alternative. There should have been an alternative. And 1972 was the bloodiest year of the conflict. But in 1972, the British government flew the Republican leadership to London for talks, and the talks failed. But from that moment, the British government knew that this was a political conflict. So therefore, they should have then realised they try and suppress it by, military means, by oppression, by torture, by putting people into imprisonment, and all that comes with that was not going to resolve the conflict. And I think, when people look back, and I think one of the things best said about this conflict, when you look back, there's things that we shouldn't have done and things that we could have done differently. And if we look at the history of the world, that has never worked. You'll never suppress a political movement by oppression. Now, you might put them down. You might put them down for a generation or 2 generations, but they'll come back. So at the heart where there's politics, deal with it as a political issue. And whereas that'll never ease the pain. And I accept Republicans have inflicted great harm and great pain on people. You'll never ease that. But what you're trying to say to a new generation, never allow the politics to slip into failure, because failure will only lead to repression, people not understand it, and then you'll end up with conflict. Deal with it as a political issue and resolve it as a political issue.
They actually apologise.
After Bloody Sunday, you said that it changed the people, maybe the support for IRA was boosted.
Oh yeah.
Was that true for yourself? Did you support IRA after that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because we seen them as the protectors. Like, we didn't carry guns. We had nothing to protect ourselves with, which was proven by what happened on Bloody Sunday. Every person that died that day and were injured was totally unarmed.
So in total, like 3,500 people, around people died in the Troubles.
Yeah.
And I think the statistics show that like around 2,000 of them were caused by Republicans. Was that justifiable?
I don't know. No death's justifiable. No death at all. No matter what side they're on, because a life is precious, and even the loss of one life is too much. And look at the statistics of over 3,500 people lost during all that period of time. Terrible. And we know as a family what the rest of those people's families are going through. So all the suffer, all the pain, all the lies, we endured all that. And we would say, look, your pain is our pain. My family who lost Michael is no different to any other family who lost someone. And that is a fact.
And would the reconciliation possible between Protestant and Catholic?
Oh yeah, sure.
In this city?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of good work goes on here. We had the mass. We had the mass last night which we hold every year. And one of those celebrants last night was from the Church of Ireland, the bishop from the Church of Ireland. So there's good work was on here, but there's been good work going on for many, many years between both sides. But you still have the loyalist aspect of it, where, for instance, out in 2 little villages outside the town, in Drumahoe and New Buildings, the para flags are flying. Yeah, you know what I mean? So you've that attitude and you've that type of person still out there. You'll never change their views, but you'll never change them. You see, the lie of Bloody Sunday was put out there, and people from the unionist community grabbed that lie and said their soldiers would never do such a thing. But after Savile, these people had to change their attitude and their thinking on Bloody Sunday. So a lot of unionist people now accept the truth of Bloody Sunday, but you still got other people there who will never ever accept the truth. We're all moving forward to a peaceful future. But it's not about me anymore, my age group. I haven't long left. It's about the younger generation coming behind us, my grandchildren, and then God knows great-grandchildren who are going to be coming behind me. That's about their future, not about me, not at our age.
We see things, the same kind of thing happening over and over again in many parts of the world, like Myanmar or maybe in Syria. What would be the lesson?
There has been a lot of bloody Sundays, and many bloody Sundays, bloody Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays. And the world, I don't think, will ever learn that you can't kill people, murder people, and get away with it. And we are saying to all governments, and we are an example of it, that we will never give up on seeking truth and justice for the innocent people who were murdered on that terrible day. You can't get away with the taking of innocent lives, because there are always people there who will fight those people's corner. The Bloody Sunday families are a group of people, ordinary people, who took on the British establishment and beat them. Simple as that. We took them on and we beat them. I'm not forgetting David Cameron apologised.
Oh, yes.
He himself said it was unjustifiable. It was wrong. He apologised. That never happened before. Never happened before. A British Prime Minister apologising for the actions of their security forces in Ireland. Don't forget, they're in Ireland nearly 800 years, if not more. And there are many atrocities carried out over the centuries, but this is the first time they actually apologised.
ジョン・ケリーさんは事件現場そばに建てられたフリーデリー博物館の職員として、また語り部として日々訪れる人たちに当日のことやその背景について語っています。
You pass the spot your brother shot?
Every day. People ask me how I work in there, how do I do it? But I see it, it's a privilege for me, if you understand, that I can work in there and I can talk on Michael's behalf. I talk for him. He can't speak for himself, so I do it for him. And all the others too as well, all the other people who died. I would tell their story on a daily basis. And again, as I said, it's a job I love doing. I love doing it. And it's just to ensure that people know the truth.
Right.
This is what this is all about. And that's what I do here on a daily basis.
50年目の追悼集会には虹がかかりました。ジョンさんが言っていたパラシュート連隊の旗を掲げた地区に来てみました。道路標識のアイルランド語の部分が塗りつぶされています。
デリーあるいはロンドンデリーの郊外にあるドラマホーという地区です。で、ボグサイドの方ではこういった照明のですねポストがアイルランド国旗の色に塗られてたかと思うんですけれども、こちらでは赤、白、青、つまりイギリス国旗の色に塗られています。そしてですね、そういった塗られ方はこの辺一帯そうなんですけれども、あそこにあるあの旗、あれが血の日曜日事件で発砲したイギリス軍のパラシュート部隊の旗なんですね。でこれをわざわざこの血の日曜日事件50周年に合わせてここに掲げている人たちがいるわけです。非常に挑発的な行為で、現在のそのイギリスのパラシュート部隊からも許容できるものではないというふうに非難されてはいるんですけれども、分断の象徴、対立の象徴だと言えます。そしてこちらですね、このボグサイドの方では IRA とアイルランド共和軍というような落書きがしてあったかと思いますけれども、こちらでは UDA、つまり ロイヤリスト側のパラミリタリーの名前が書かれていたりします。でこちら大通りに出てくると、幹線道路に出てくると、あちらにはイギリスのユニオンジャック。
旗はメディアで報じられて批判の声が出ても掲げられ続けていました。事件から50年、北アイルランド和平から24年、しこりは消えていません。治安部隊による過剰な武力の行使は時にさらなる暴力の引き金となり、何年にもわたって禍根を残す。血の日曜日事件はそれを今に伝えています。50年経って、これからこの町が過去の対立と惨劇を乗り越えていけるかどうか、それはまだ何とも言えません。
ニュースディグ